Well, we're ending strong today with our esteemed pastor, Bruce Shelton, who first began attending services at the Fellowship of the Inner Light in 1973 at the old Seahorse Inn. The fellowship has played an important role in his spiritual life and growth ever since. He currently serves as president of the board of directors and is the senior pastor of the fellowship. A retired probation officer and counselor, he serves to help fellowship members in need. As music minister, he keeps our Sunday services vibrant and spirit-filled. In addition, Bruce cares for our fellowship's buildings and grounds. Please help me welcome Bruce Shelton.
Well, okay, good. Let's see, I always find it's helpful when I give a talk like this, if you help me with the talk. So what I'd ask you, let's everybody just be quiet for a few moments, and let's ask God to just use me as his speaker this morning, this afternoon, to say the words that you most need to hear. Thank you, God. All right. Okay, well, today's talk is called The Lilies of the Field, from the Sermon on the Mount. And it's about prosperity consciousness. I'll start off with a quote by Paul. He says, this is Paul Solomon, says, "Know and know it well, the fellowship of the inner light will prosper abundantly when this fellowship takes responsibility to teach each individual member of this family the science of prosperity. For it is, in fact, an exact science, mathematically structured and mathematically certain." And I thought that was beautiful. So this is the purpose of this talk, is to help people to understand what this means, prosperity consciousness, and how to experience it. I'd like to start the talk with a story about this man who was a master, right, of manifestation. He was a guru in India, and he could just think the thought, whatever he thought, he could manifest it, right, including money. His name was Nityananda, one of the famous gurus in India. Nityananda, as his fame began to spread in India, he started building ashrams and temples, and he would, when he was building an ashram, he'd hire local villagers to come and to work, you know, and he'd pay them 2 rupees, yeah, 2 rupees a day. Did I say that right? Rubies, yeah. Yeah. But he had an unusual way of paying them. Instead of giving them money at the end of the day, he would say, when you're going back home tonight, just look under any rock and you'll find your 2 rupees, right? And lo and behold, every night they'd go home and pick a rock and they'd look under, as their pay for the day, 2 rupees, their paper notes. And then, of course, they're going to look under other rocks too. I mean, you know, no other rocks had the ruby except the one they chose, right? Well, the local constable heard about this guru that was paying his employees in freshly minted rubies, and he got suspicious. He started, this sounds like a counterfeiting operation to me. You know, how can this guy just come up with all this freshly printed money? And so he gets his chief deputy. They go out and pay a little visit to Nityananda, and they say, you know, he's a guru, so they treat him with a lot of respect. They say, "We understand you have freshly minted money that you're able to pay your all these workers with. We just would like to know, where do you get all this money from?" He says, "No problem, I'll show you." So he was kind of surprised at how open this guy was. It's going to show him where he's getting the money. So he says, "Just follow me." So they find a trail. He takes them down this dusty trail into the jungle, and they hike for a few miles. And then, next thing you know, they find themselves walking through a swamp, right? And now it was kind of weird because there's snakes and everything in this swamp, and they're trying to, you know, keep getting their feet stuck in they're sitting on and walking on boards that go across. And then Nityananda says, "Here it is," and he puts his hand in the water and pulls up a whole stack of ruby notes. And of course, the constable was a little bit freaked out by this, and his chief officer, and they they both said, well, thank you very much. This interview's over with. And they started walking away. And then next thing you know, they're galloping out of the junk, out of that swamp. They thought this is too much. They didn't want to offend this guy. So Nityananda was a master of prosperity consciousness, okay? And most of us don't quite achieve that level, right? But I just want to give you one example of how far we can go with prosperity consciousness. Now, there was another great master of prosperity consciousness. His name was Jesus the Christ. And in the Sermon on the Mount, in Matthew 5, he gives a wonderful talk about, he teaches us about prosperity consciousness. And it's so good, instead of me trying to paraphrase it, which would be an injustice, I'm just going to read to you these verses. Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, which you will wear. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothes? So right there's a core teaching, you know. We don't need to worry, you see, about where things are coming. And he tells you this is what you have to do not to worry. It says, behold the birds of the air, they do not sow or reap or stow away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than them? Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? I love that. How many of us find ourselves worrying about money or worrying about this? I do. I'm a Virgo. I can't help it, you know. Buzz Myers is a great astrologer. He said the Virgos are the worriers of the universe, and he had a point. But so all the worrying actually serves absolutely no purpose. It's wasted energy. And he says, and why do you worry about clothes? Consider the lilies of the field. And I love this verse. They do not labor or spin, yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor was ever arrayed as one of these. Therefore, if that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith? So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For everyone seems to run after all these things, and yet your heavenly Father knows that you need them. Now this is the core teaching here. He says, but seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and all these things will be given unto you. In other words, if we put God first in our life, everything else will fall in place. If we forget about God, we got problems, you know. And then the last verse here is another beautiful teaching. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will take care of itself. Instead, focus upon today, the moment, and be with God. Be here now. You know, a core theme that I personally have heard all my life. You know, Ram Dass wrote Be Here Now in 1973. And then Eckhart Tolle comes along when Ram Dass is paralyzed and can't continue his normal preaching. And he takes, it's like he took the banner and he wrote Be Here Now. He wrote The Power of Now. So this is like we all know this. You know, this is so, everything is right now. The only moment that ever exists is right now, you see. And so he's saying, Jesus is teaching this way back 2,000 years ago. He says, don't worry about tomorrow. Instead, focus upon today. Now, this brings us to this talk about tithing, okay? I'd like to talk a little bit about tithing. You know, people say, well, okay, Bruce, I get it. You know, I do believe God's the source of all my incomes. God meets all my needs. I truly believe that, right? And you do. When a person says that, they really do believe it. But yet, Bruce, I'm still broke all the time, you know? I just don't seem to have enough money, you know? And, I have it for a while, and then all of a sudden I don't have it. And now, it's interesting psychology here that kind of explains the problem. The psychology is this. We have this belief, God, you know, I believe that you're going to take care of me. But there's a secondary thought in the back of our mind. We can call that the sponsoring thought. And the sponsoring thought is saying, oh my God, I don't have the money to pay my rent or my mortgage this Friday. It's due. They're threatened to kick me out. And so this negative thought back here negates the positive thought. Can you all hear that? Yes. See, that's the problem. So we want to become aware of that secondary thought and neutralize it. And so the question is, and what we're dealing with, of course, the negative thought is all rooted in fear. It's primary teaching in the Course in Miracles, all about the power of fear. And fear is, we can define fear as simply being the absence of God or the absence of love. So the antidote for fear is tithing, okay? Talking about believing in God is one thing. We can all talk a good talk. I could get up here and say, just believe in God, da-da-da. But when we actually take our hard-earned money and put it on the table, you see, that's walking our talk. That means it frees us from our attachment to money. See, it's extremely interesting psychologically what's going on. When we actually give money freely because we have faith, yes, God, I really believe you are the source of all my needs, and here's 10%. It's all the money I have. My belief is all the money I have is God's money anyway. I'm just temporarily, it's just passing through me. So I'm giving 10% back to God. God would have that spent. It makes sense to me. And it frees me from my fear of lack, which is the key, the reason tithing works. Now, this is my personal story about tithing. I like the way Anna Lee was talking about her personal stories here. To me, personal stories are great because it comes from the heart. Well, I started tithing. I was taught tithing at Talbot Park Baptist Church in Norfolk. I was starting to go there when I was 8 years old. They kind of somebody asked me how I ended up. I think Brian asked me this, or somebody asked me how I ended up at a Baptist church because my parents didn't go to church, and they had a great music program at this big Baptist church back in, we're talking about the 1950s, and Slater Mounts was a choir director, and he. Some of my buddies say, Bruce, I have a great softball game every Saturday morning at 9 p.m. back here behind Granby Elementary School. Come and play. And so you go and play at 9 o'clock till 10. Then you walk up to the church, and 11 to 12 you have choir rehearsal. So that's how they got us, all these young people, involved, and it was magical because that's how I learned to sing. You see, I mean, I didn't plan all this; it just happened. So that's my first real introduction to music because we'd have a choir rehearsal on Saturday from 11 to 12. The next day we'd have, I was in the ambassador choir. We all had gold robes and white stoles, and we'd all be out there singing to everybody 8 o'clock in the morning, right? Or 11 o'clock service. And then also the Baptist church taught me about the Bible. We had Sunday school every Sunday, and I learned all about the Bible and Noah and the ark and all this. And as I heard it on one level when I was 8 years old, and I heard it on a totally different level when I was 16. I remember one time Michael McCarthy was speaking up here, and he was saying he was raised Catholic. He says, as a Catholic, we never went to Sunday school. They didn't teach Sundays. They don't have a Sunday school in the Catholic Church. They don't teach you about the Bible. And I thought, that's really weird, And I found out other Catholics have had the same experience. But I learned in the Baptist Church, I learned about the Bible. And most importantly, we had this wonderful minister there named Dr. Ernest Haunts. And, all Baptists are very conservative. But there are fundamentalist conservatives, and then there are moderate conservatives. Thank God he was a moderate conservative. And he taught us all about the power of prayer, which is, what teachings this was, when I was growing up. This is what I needed to learn about. And so this is all taking me to my point about Talbot Park Baptist Church in this talk. Every Sunday, the Baptists would have what they call Pledge Sunday. Once a year, they'd have what they call Pledge Sunday. And everybody would come there, regardless of your age, and you would pledge to give X amount of dollars, or cents, in my case, every week to the church, you see. And then he said, you really should give 10%, you see. If you give 10%, God will reward you. And it was all biblically based, and he would tell us about Malachi 3:10, which says, bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house, and prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it. Wow, okay. So I hear this story. I want to be a good Baptist, right? And I love this church. And at that time, I had my first job. I was 13 years old. I was a newspaper boy, and my route was DePaul Hospital. And I went from room to room and sold newspapers, you know. Each newspaper sold for 5 cents. And I learned about women's pocketbooks, you know. I'd say, give me 5 cents, and the woman would say, I got a nickel down here somewhere. And 5 minutes later, she finally pulled it out, found it, right? Here's my nickel, right? And I got to keep a penny of it, and 4 cents went to the newspaper. It was an afternoon paper back then. They called the Ledger Dispatch. 6 days a week, I worked hard. And then the end of the, so I said, now, Dr. Hans is saying I should give 10% of my work. So end of the week, I'd count up all my nickels and dimes, you know, which included tips. And I'd have about $8 or $9, you know. And I said, now, 10% of this would be, if I make $9 on a good week, that'd be 90 cents a week I need to give to Talbot Park. And I said, man, I really worked hard for this. And I really don't have enough money to be given to the church. But at the same time, in biology class, I had learned about the scientific method, okay? Now, all of science is based on the scientific method. And being a good, you know, Virgo with a good analytical mind, I thought, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the scientific method to see if this hypothesis is actually true, that if I give 10%, that I'll have prosperity in my life, right? And you know how it works, you know, you collect the data then. So I said, for 3 months, I'm going to tithe 10%, even though I don't have the money, even though I'd rather spend this 90 cents on I can buy 2 banana splits, you know, at Ben Franklin 5 and 10 store, and I'm going to give those 2 banana splits up, and instead I'm going to give 10% to Talbot Park Baptist Church. I'm going to do this strictly as an experiment to see what happens, right? I mean, I was pretty smart for a 13-year-old, you know. I wasn't just going to give it blindly. I had the science behind me. So I started doing this, and an amazing thing happened. As soon as I started giving 10% every week, I felt this sense of freedom from money. You know, before I was making the money, and I always felt like I didn't have enough, you know. And but all of a sudden, I felt this sense of freedom. I felt good about money. My relationship with money changed, right? And I just felt good about it. I didn't have the, you know, the gates of heaven didn't open and flood me with money then, but I felt this sense of prosperity. And I said, well, you know what? A good scientist also wants to have a double-blind study. So I says, I'm going to go for 30 days now and not give any money. I'd done it for 3 months, and I was liking it. I'm going to go 30 days and see what happens. See if I feel the same way, not giving any money. I did it for 30 days, and it was really weird. I felt like I didn't have enough money the whole month. My relationship with money changed totally, even though I had 90 cents more a week to spend. And so from that point on, there's never been a single time. There's never been a single time when I have not tithed. And yeah, no, it's fine. I just need to catch my breath here. My heart starts. You know, I can feel the energy. So I've always tithed, and I've always had prosperity in my life. As I grew older, I'd have times when I really found myself in debt. You know, I was always like, I like to spend money, right? So I'd end up putting money on Visa, and I have an $8,000 or $9,000 debt. And doggone it, if money didn't still come to me. But from one source or the other, the money would come, and it was taken care of. And I attribute this to tithing, and it's the times when we're the most broke, that's when we need to tithe the most, you know? And now I've done this my entire life, and I married this woman, you know, you all know Marty, a lot of you know Marty. And she had the same story that I did. She was raised over in Hampton, and she attended Hampton Baptist Church. And she was a tither. So the both of us, she tithed all her life too. So I wasn't expecting all this energy coming through. But so we both tithed, and we both were so prosperous. A lot of you came to the party we had last Thursday night. You can see that house. This is all part of what's happened to us. And I attribute that house and my home, which is all paid for, to God's love, and taking care of me. Get myself together here. But I like this feeling. It's my heart just opens just thinking about all this. So, and in any way, that's been my experience. Marty and I both have experienced great prosperity. I'm more prosperous now at 77 than I've ever been. And it's nothing I've done. Marty and I always were frontline workers. She was a nurse, I was a probation officer, right? Frontline workers. I ran juvenile group homes, but that meant you didn't make a lot of money, And I never have made a lot of money, but yet I've always had this sense of prosperity, and it's been wonderful. Sources. When I worked for the state of Virginia, I never viewed the state of Virginia as the source of my income. Okay, I view the state of it's God is just using the state of Virginia as a channel to provide me with my finances. Therefore, I never had a fear about if I lost my job for whatever reason, or I quit the job. I never had a fear of not having enough money because I knew God would just open up another channel. You see. So it's really wonderful to have this relationship with money. And when you it's really a relationship with God. When you have that relationship, like Jesus says, put God first and everything else falls in place. And that's my testimony. Now, back in 1997, I was the treasurer of the church. And we had this woman come to this church named Edwina Gaines. Some of you may remember her. She was a master of teaching she was a master teacher of tithing. And she would go to all the unity churches around and all the churches like our church and the liberal progressive churches and give her a talk. And I thought, this Saturday afternoon, I've been working hard all week. I really don't want to go to this talk, but I can't get out of it because I'm the treasurer. Obviously people are going to say, don't you even care enough, so I'm going to go to this talk. She's going to say, tithe your money, da-da-da-da-da. So I went to the talk, and it was one of the most amazing talks. I never forget, it was like in October of 1997, and right before Thanksgiving, and she got us all inspired about tithing. And then I asked her, I says, now what about the church itself? Did our church tithe? And she said, oh yeah, absolutely, And we started tithing. I went back to the board, and the board said, okay, this is a time when we had just enough money every month to pay our mortgage and, our utilities and just basic costs. We didn't have a penny left over, paycheck to paycheck. But I said, let's go ahead and have faith and start tithing. And we started tithing, and immediately, the next month, the income went way up, on Thanksgiving and Christmas. And we thought, well, this is really interesting, but maybe this is just, it's this holiday season. So the next year, I tracked we did an annual report for the next year. This was 1998. The income of this church, went up about 30%. And we didn't do anything different. We didn't have a new minister. We didn't change anything. The income just just went up, and it started in 1998. Now, we have consistently, since that time as a church, except for a couple of year period there, we have tithed 10% of our income. It's one of the great joys we have as a board of directors is every meeting we start off by getting a treasurer's report, and we say how much money from Lloyd, how much money have we made it came in this month. Okay, 10% of that is X amount of dollars. Usually it's around $600 or $700 is our tithe. And then we say, well, where are we going to tithe this money to? And we do that. And we have people in Africa. We have refugees there that are starving, and we literally are George Michelo's helping us with this, giving them money every month, $250 every month to the refugees. And then we find people locally. This month somebody called, and this mother he called and came to this church. She says, they just cut off our electric bill this morning. We just we're 3 months behind. And I found out her husband had a drug problem, and all the money was going for drugs. And so they said, we don't have any electricity. I got a 15-month-old child. So we used our tithe money to help, to pay that. It's like $250, I think. And then I'm also working with her husband now to get him into a recovery program. I said, we'll give you the money, but you got to do your part too. And he's been now going to NA every day, Narcotics Anonymous. Whew. I wasn't expecting to have all this energy coming through me. My point is, we tithe, and guess what? This church is prosperous. It's amazing, you see. Money just keeps coming. You know, and I've been with this church 40 years, you know, as a manager. Kind of, you know, early 80s I got involved with leadership. I came in the 70s. I like to sit in the back row, soak up all the good energy, go home and just enjoy the rest of the week. But, so we do tithing, you know, every board meeting. And the last thing I'm going to say is that I'm going to give you a challenge, okay? If you're not a tither now, use a scientific method, right? And try tithing for a couple of months. Set maybe 2 months. In 2 months, I'm going to tithe no matter what. Who do you tithe to? You tithe to whoever you feel like God wants you to give the money to. And I'd like to also read this quote from Paul. He says, "Be certain that the fellowship itself is as committed," I meant to say this earlier, "is as committed to tithing as are the individual members. With all that you receive in your center, your family, your church, your community, give 10% of that freely to other organizations, associations, churches, missions, any charitable work, wherever it's needed. Send it forth, always 1/10 of all that you receive as a family, and let it work for your prosperity." So we were taught this. See, it's a fundamental teaching of this church, of tithing, the church tithing. And so the challenge I'm going to give you is use the scientific method in your own life and tithe. See what happens. Now, there's an extremely important point here to note. If you do this because I'm going to make a deal with God, okay? I'm making a contract. Okay, God, I'm going to do this. I don't know if it's going to work, but I'm going to have faith. I'm going to give 10%. But I expect you to do your part, God, you know. If you do it like that type of an attitude, it does not work. You'll be disappointed. What you do is you give freely from your heart. It's love. It's like unconditional love. You give unconditionally from your heart, and you just say, we're giving this money as an expression of love, you see. And if you do it with that attitude of humility, not expecting anything in return, just allowing God to meet your needs, that's totally different. You see, the ego wants to make deals, right? This sounds like a good deal. Paul was talking about mathematically perfect and all that. If you do it with that type of thought, that's the ego. You want to come from the heart, from the spirit. If you do that, just see what happens. You know, I've had amazing stories, you know, from people that started tithing. So, okay, that's my talk. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.